All right, hello everybody. And we wish you a good spring evening, right? So it's the 2nd of April, and presumably the spring has started. So it's been a little bit slow here in Spain, right? So you see with all this strange weathers and winds and dusts and so on. But we hope that it's kind of better in the other parts where the spring is in full bloom. So the subject of today is their shoulder blades, right? So, and I'm not sure whether there was a request for the shoulder blades or whether it was our own kind of internal things, or Manu, it was your, so you kind of used the administrator rights to sort of to push this subject. But it's a very important and very interesting subject, and at the same time probably one of the most complex and mysterious, because the shoulder blade is a very tricky joint, and it's it plays a huge role, and I'll try to do my best in illustrating it. So like the role and how this kind of entire contribution works. And well, we'll see what happens, right? So you see this kind of the first take on this in a relatively compact form. And I'm not expecting that we would be able to cover everything at once, but at least plant, some key ideas on, well, why you really want to appreciate the shoulder blade and why you want to kind of really make an effort to learn and study and kind of get your internal sort of visualizations empowered in order to deal with this. First point that I want you to keep in mind before we even start going further, that when you think of a shoulder blade, the very first image that has to come to your mind is the image of the bird's wing. So that is the primary image that you really need to keep in mind, and it's very valuable on many counts. So first important count that you get from the shoulder blade perception and linking it to the wing is the fact that you start perceiving everything together, right? So you see, like, once you see it as the wing, then you stop asking these questions like, okay, what is the elbow? What is the wrist? What are the digits? What is the shoulder joint, right? You can really see the wing. That's the first point. The second point, which immediately sort of stems from the first one, is this. What is the neutral position of the wing? Is it a fully open and a fully extended arm? And the answer is no. See, the operational position of the wing is this. That's the operational position. And again, as the wing, it's a fully normal thing. Just think about it, right? The birds can fly whatever thousands of kilometers and so on with their wing being in that particular state. Now, what does it resemble you? When you look at that, what kind of resemblance you get out of this? The answer is, well, it actually looks exactly like a spastic arm, right? Bent hand, bent elbow, bent shoulder, everything is bent. So the first practical question that you want to ask yourself there, oh, maybe I have to ask myself a question, is it that wrong? Or maybe it's actually, the deepest fundamental layout and organization that the arm, or in that sense afterwards, at some point we'll talk about the leg from the same perspective, So, or maybe it's this deepest organization that is being reclaimed as the most reliable option of the connections that the body has. And the third thing that you see here, what is the third thing that you see here? That once you understand that the arms, that the bones are in that strange bent position, right? Bones, sorry, joints are in that strange bent positions. What else do you see here? You see that the total contour, which actually defines the integrity of the wing, right? So you see, comes all around that line. So you see, it's a very special cord-like, and if you ever saw whatever, the chicken wing or anything like this, right? So you see, these are those lines that you can see here. They are like cords. They are very strong, and they are like skin specializations, right? So what is that idea? So this idea of the wing clearly shows you who is their main boss. That it's the skin, the ectoderm is that primary integration that really gets the setting. And surprisingly, right, so you see, on par with these lines, with these cords, you have these inner facets of their links to their shoulder blade, right? So you see, this is the only place where the attachment to the bone is being recruited. But how should we see it? We should see it as the continuation of that cord, so that in first place it's this kind of skin thing, right? The skin uniformity with a special sort of super attachments at the level of those shoulder blade edges that then actualizes via the more intense tension, actualizes the more specific and more increased bone growth. That's how the bone forms there as a sediment. So this image of the wing is very, very important, and in fact it gives you this first understanding. But also, what do you know about the wing? The wing is flat. It's broad, but it's flat. And again, don't fall into the idea of this, utility, that it's flat because it's good for flying, blah, 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 and all these things. That's not just even secondary. The primary thing that we have to talk about is that how this kind of composition, how this build came to being. So not about the purpose, not about the value, but how it's sort of internally organized. What are those sort of primary internal reliable connections? And if you look at it this way, it's the system where you get the maximum percentage of the skin, right? So you see, that's what I want you to see there. Why is it flat? Well, because skin is highly controllable, muscles and bones are highly incontrollable, non-controllable. So there, the embeds, the specializations which are formed within this original framework. And only the further improvements of the constraints, stabilities, and so on allow those elements to be kind of active as we are like familiar, as we used to interpret them, right? Because we count from the bone outwards. So that's the reason. Maximum percentage of the skin. That's the secret of the wing. Why? Because the skin is the most reliable controller that we have, the most reliable constraint. That's the central kind of tenet of the whole thing. And once we see this picture, once we see that, then everything else will become kind of easier to understand, right? Because then, of course, once you see those pictures, once you see those strings, once you see the skin and so on, so then you can understand that what is the, let's say, the human arm. You know, the arm that we are like used to see, the ones that that is familiar for us. So this is the arm, and let me try to find maybe. Well, you see, if we look at it from the side, so what are we seeing? If we draw the same lines, right? So you would say, okay, that's the wing. And, you know, these lines, you see, I will draw them even a bit further away, right? I will draw these lines a bit further away just to accentuate the fact that these skin lines, right? So you see, they could be further, 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 further. So that would be the demo which shows you that our typical appearance when we expect the muscles to follow the actual bones, that's a big bonus that is only possible when you've got the next specializations within the skin. So that's kind of the, if original, you see, if you look at the wing, which is flat, you know, I'm looking from the front, right? So you see it's flat. And then somehow you start gaining the width, right? So you see the width, and then that's how the thing eventually becomes round. And again, what do you know about the children with the CP? That they're, whether it's the legs or whether it's the arms, they are flat, right? So you see narrow and flat. What are the signs of progress? Getting thicker, rounder. So that's exactly what we are looking at. And of course, speaking of this, when we discuss that, the same ideas of relative roundness and the relative support of this refer to the bone, refer to the, you know, deep fascia, refer to the muscles themselves, refer to the, you know, to the fat, refer to the skin itself, right? So these are the integrations we have to keep in mind when we study this thing. So that's, you know, and once you understand that this is a wing, you realize, right? So you see that what we have is a huge, huge, huge bonus, which implies all the primary connections are, you know, in order to be there. So, and that's why the typical drawings that you have, so you see, that's what you typically get from the textbook, right? So you see the textbook gives you the bones, which are sort of hanging one after another. And then, you know, that chapter, whatever, chapter 1 are the bones, chapter 2 or chapter 2 would be the ligaments, chapter 3 would be the muscles, and so on. So then, you know, they would be kind of piling them together. The reality, the opposite. It starts with the skin, and gradually the bones form there, you know, like all the other specializations form there as their, like, you know, their specializations. They are like formed as a sediment within that tensional system. So that's why I want you to forget this. Don't overthink it. Don't try to think about the bones and then the bones are being connected and so on. So this is the most misleading thing, which is, you know, possible. And what we need to get is, you know, this understanding that everything works in this fashion of going into the idea of the flat arm, the actual wing. So that's the first line of thinking that I want you to get into. So today I have chosen, well, I mean, I've kind of made a collection of several cases. So one case is a beta case, right? So you see, this is where we can see how the person is able to use the shoulder girdle and particularly the shoulder blades, right? So you see, able to use them for their stabilization. So that's, we will study that and understand that ultimate role, right? Then I also took some other examples where we are looking at their very wing-like appearances, where the person, as you can see through the side, right, and as you can see through his reactions, what he's doing, right, he's self-stabilizing himself with this, with the spread of his wings, right? So it's really literally spreading the wings and integrating the entire body through those wings, but that's still a child who is stronger, more capable, and so on. So like the size, the weight, and so on. So it's certain capacity there. And the third scenario that we're going to look at are those more depleted scenarios, right? So you see where we don't fully appreciate or like cannot really fully see the development of the back, and we see the shoulder blades more as kind of just bones, right? And how those bones, they integrate what they do and how they kind of attach to the body, and what they mean and how they work in this kind of situation. So those would be the three main lines of investigation that we are going to take. And yeah, so that's sort of the main focus that we are looking at. So before we move there, let's have a look at the whole shoulder girdle from the top. Right, so you see this is the top view. So that's very important to understand that when we discuss the shoulder blades, that the shoulder blades are the part of this total girdle, right? So you see the girdle means that's the circle which is linked, well, circle, the loop which is linked through, and that works together as a unit of connection. So again, that's a very important image to have, and this type of the top view also tells you this idea that if we draw the central line here, then it kind of divides the situation, the total depth into sort of half and half, right? So you see where you got this front half and where you get this back half, right? So what is the key thing that we are looking at? The key thing that we are looking at is, of course, the development of the back, the dorsal development. So that's a universal thing that we are dealing with. Every child, without exception, has the dorsal deficit. The child who doesn't have a dorsal deficit is not on our radar, right? So you see, this is the child who doesn't come in our proximity, vicinity, or gets interested in what we are doing. So this image of the depth, therefore, is very important. But once we look at this depth, then I would also recommend to add something quite natural, but let's sort of understand it also clearly, the idea of the latitudes. Let's see what we have, what Google gives us. Okay, so more or less, right? So we take a lot of latitudes here. So that's the idea that I want you to keep in mind when we discuss the different levels, right? So you see, suppose if that was an equator, like the widest part, right? So then you're looking at the next level. So you see the next latitude. And the thing is that they are going to be in that relationship, right? So you see the lower part is going to be broad. And then if you take another part, right, so you see if that was the equator, that would be the broadest. That was, say, this, right? So you see then you've got this, and then you've got this. So you see as you go on, you will see how the circles get smaller, but the point is, what we want to visualize here is that if you take it as those levels, they go like this, right? So you see, that's the important thing to understand, that the latitude, let's say the 40 degrees latitude, 20 degrees latitude, and the 0 degree latitude, the equator, they have this relationship to each other. So you see, if there was no smoothness in transitions, they would be just going as the steps, right? So you see, that's a really important thing to understand, that the relationship between them is this relationship of the steps. So why is it important? Because if that was their neck, right? So you see, that would be the top of the shoulder girdle, that will be the back of the shoulder girdle, right? So you see, that's the relationship that they have. They are related to each other like those steps. But on top of those steps, why is it not so clear? Because the skin covers them, right? And the same thing also you observe on the surface of the earth, right? It kind of gives you a smooth line, which takes away the idea of those steps. And that's really the key point. When we look at the child, we are always going to see first the skin. So we will see the smooth part. But that brings the biggest question. Underneath this smooth part, what is happening? Do we have those steps? Because those steps are critical for the independent rotations, independent stability, and so on and so on, like stacking of those levels. And so that's really the key point to understand. Because, everything looks blended. And of course, that means that within the skin, if I take my purple or whatever is the name of this color, purple, so like as the deep attachments. So in order to control it, I need to have the kind of connections and the specializations within the skin that are going to allow this type of depth. So stay with me for a little bit, and I will show how it all makes sense and being meaningful. So in fact, it's very clear. Look, when you look at this girl, right, so you see that's a good usage of the shoulder blade. But meanwhile, we are going to look at this, right? So these are the cases where there is not much of the posterior depth. So what you're seeing here, you're seeing the situation where the visible bone is dominating. So you don't have the image that this is really their true depth, right? So you don't have the image of the dorsal thickness in this image. So that's what we are looking at here. So we want to reconcile two images. On the one hand, this kind of bony image, so rib cage, shoulder blades, bone on bone, how they connected, and then certain covering of the soft tissues on top. So like the deep fascia muscle, fat skin. That's one image. And then the other image is the image of the thick ectoderm, the wing, right? So you see the wing with the thick, soft tissues within which gradually the places and the spaces for their bone positions gradually emerge. So what you are seeing here, so this is a kind of in between. So you see the child who is in good state, beta state, when you observe that case. So you see what's happening here. You see that as she is putting the weight and transferring the weight, pushing herself from the ground, right? You can see that the shoulder blades, they are staying very, very stable. See, they are not moving anywhere. So she applies the load from the bottom, that load arrives to the top, right? And the top bounces it back. So why she is able to move herself, right? Why she is able to push herself? For the simple reason that the shoulder blades do not slide up. Now, if the shoulder blade slides up under the load, are you able to push? No. Then the shoulder blade belongs to this triangle from the top. It's actually being sort of sky hooked. It's being the part of this package of that layering which is linked to the top and which continuously being dragged to the top. But you might say, like, how could the shoulder blade be dragged so much? So for this, we have to recall this image and say, well, within that wing, which we have seen going towards the arm, that wing, right? So you see that wing and the wing. We also have this primary height of the dorsal thickness. So which is going at the base and then going all the way to the coccyx. So that is the height of the package that is represented by the SCM, by the trapezius and by the latissimus dorsi. So those are the thicknesses of the skin. So you can see it here, but I can redraw it. So you see, it's this total height, which is the deepest layout, the true layout of the back. And this is the layout that links the head, like this, all the way to the coccyx. So that's the total primary link of the back. That's the layout. If this layout is not there, then the arms are going to slide all the way up towards the head in order to control, to help the control of the head via this link to the arms. So that's what you have to see there. You have to see two pictures there. On the one hand, the primary dorsal level, which is organized like this kite from the base of the skull all the way to the sacrum, of which the most known subsets are the trapezius and latissimus dorsi. And then the second thing that we have to see is actually the overlap of the wing on top of it. Right? So you see, that's the wing which overlaps. So that's the second level. And this is where we have different combinations. So we have the situations which are like that. So this is the scenario where the primary kite itself is still not fully developed, right? So you see that the primary kite itself doesn't have the full thickness. So that's why original tendency for the shoulder blades is to slide up. As we work, they gradually descend. That's very true, that they descend and they don't climb all the way to the neck, but still the big point for us is to achieve the level of the total thickness. So because what we do here, how we deal with this, right? So you see, we improve the actual connectivity of the true neck and the true spine. So that's why the actual secondary support, or the secondary set of links, which are, this usage of this part of the kite, the usage of the arms for the head control. So we are not, then it's no longer necessary. So that's why the whole thing slides down. But still, the thickness is still poor. The dorsal thickness is poor, and the wing thickness on top of it is still poor, right? So we see that's what we need, two things. We need the total dorsal thickness, and we need the wing thickness. These are the two components that we need to have as the really good progress. So, and that's why what happens is that if we take the situation like 3 stages or 4 stages, right? If we take 4 stages, so stage 1 is where it's missing all depths, and then you would see that it's the head which is kind of pulling the shoulder blades towards it. So that's very high position of the shoulder blades, very blended back, right? Then the head connections improve and the spinal connections improve. So we see the situation like this: skinny back and more regular positions of the shoulder blades not sliding upwards. Then comes the third phase, when the shoulder blades have to evolve as the wings. As they evolve as the wings, they have to shift sideways and get much thicker there. And then after that, from being much thicker and shifted sideways, they have to travel dorsally and become those stabilizing things. So that's why what we have, that the, like, I'll call them 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or I can also label as them as -4, -3, -2, -1, right? So what we have, like negatives, right? So you see the depth of negatives there. So if we look at it this way, then we understand that we have similar phases, right? So the phase of the shoulder blades being all the way up and the phase of the shoulder blades kind of getting to the side, they're similar. And the phase of this kind of missing depth of the back and the phase of the really good depth, they also have similar appearance if counted as the shoulder blades, right? But the dorsal thickness is very, very different, and the divisions between the individual muscles, fascia, and so on would be very different. So it means that in the kind of this more advanced case, it's going to be really well embedded. So, and that's how you would be able to use the shoulder girdle for their stability. So that's what you are looking at, and that's why the image that you are looking at is this image. So the true weight bearing, using their arms, pushing the entire weight of the body, being able to push the entire weight of the body without the shoulder blades sliding, right? And you see, I'm intentionally drawing it like this so that you would get the idea that this is the latitude, right? So that's the latitude of the edges of the shoulder blades. And then here would be the latitude of the bottom of the neck. So, and again, you see, it kind of looks smooth, but we remember as we looked at the picture of the earth, right? So you see, in reality, it's those steps between the base of the skull circumference, the middle of the neck, and the bottom of the neck. and then the depth of the depth of the edges, and then the depth of the shoulder girdle. So those are these relationships which go as steps, but we don't see it because it's all covered by the skin. So it all looks smooth, but in order for this to work, the skin must have those internal specializations, preventing them from sliding one on top of another. And at the same time, the bone connections have to be also stable enough over the deep fascia and so on, so that they would allow these steps over there. So it's two-way process, from the skin blending into the bone and from the bone rising up towards the skin. So that's how you get those latitudes. But thinking in latitudes is very, very important to appreciate this depth. And also, once you start thinking in those latitudes, you would understand that once this level is achieved, what you're going to see that the shoulder blade itself is not yet stable within that latitude, right? So you see it achieved the latitude, but within the latitude, the longitudes are still very, very slippery. So that's really very important, the key image for you to keep in mind as what are the good things that you're looking for in the big picture. And of course, as we go further, right, so you see, this is where I'm talking about the fact that one of the big reasons why we are able to talk about the shoulder blade sort of that specifically today and add this kind of conversation now is that the usage of the Vibra tools have really opened a whole new set of the opportunities for us in improving the stability of the shoulder girdle quite radically. So you see this with my finger, I'm pointing out at the formation of those edges where the soft, where the two parts blend, right? So you see where the part that comes up from the, bone level and it comes in, inward from the skin level when they meet and make this double stitch. Again, the thing is that historically, the shoulder blade has been a very difficult thing for us to address because, in reality, that's what we have. The shoulder blade is a flat bone. And that's why everything that hides underneath the shoulder blade, everything that makes it connection towards the, towards the ribs is very difficult to access. So this is a very big and like really crucial transition that we've been able to achieve, because you see, if you look at it from the bottom, you can see there is a lot of things, a lot of elements on the inner sides of the shoulder blade, right? So you see a lot of these Velcro attachments, and we need to be able to get there. So, which is without the vibration tools, which is not just difficult, but sometimes, it's close to impossible. So to get the right kind of stimulus to achieve that deep level. So that's the main idea, right? And then once we have those connections, you see how the things are then shaping up, right? So she said, then suddenly everything moves much smoother. You can see here she's able to use one arm, right? And what is she doing? She's shifting the weight on it, pushing, and you see able to lift her entire body with just the load transfer on one arm. Again, if the shoulder blade was slippery and would have slid upwards or tilt or do whatever, right? Then she wouldn't be able to do this push. So, and then now that's a double action, right? So you see, this is where she's able, not just to do the movement towards the side, but where she's able to push herself backwards. So 2 hands and the legs, in case that the pelvis is sliding forwards, she's able to do the push and reposition herself, right? So that's what we can see here very well. And then also, in this position, we can see that, the load transfer becomes very, very obvious and sort of self-generated, right? So you see, this is where you can see that the edges very, very clearly, right? You can see those edges very clear. But again, I would still emphasize that's a 2 sides meeting. So that's the bones being printed into the skin and the skin being kind of velcroed over the bone. Bone into the skin, skin over the bone. So that's a double velcroing process. So if one is missing, you have a deficit, right? So you see, and then, like, for example, I saw that, Kari was on the line, right? So you see, hi, Team Consta, right? So you see, like, again, his case is a good example. For example, in his scenario, the printing from the skin goes quite well towards the bone, but the printing from the bone to the skin is, that velcroing historically has been a difficult one. So kids come in different kind of mixes and formats. So some have one element kind of leading, the other one being very deficient. Some kind of have more proportional half-half. Some have both elements very deficient, right? So that's what these are the mixes and matches that you're dealing with, but the big picture is always the same. And again, what you're seeing here, thanks to this positioning, also, she's able to do much higher quality of the load transfer, right? And doing all sorts of actions. So pushing herself off the ground without sliding shoulder blades, right? So you see, then pushing herself backwards, shifting the weight on one arm, and then pushing herself forwards. So a lot of different things which are coming through this. And then it's a big push backwards, which is also possible thanks to the stability of the shoulder girdle. So that's a double push backwards, and you can see how the thing is working as those counter, the availability of the counter phases. And again, you need the stable loading of the shoulder blade in order to be able, the stable position of the shoulder blade, this kind of loop, in order to be able to do this secondary movement. So it has to be fully looped like this. So in order to be able to do back and forth movements, as we can see here, which are then obviously enabling the crawling and all other, functionally valuable things. And this is, getting the full arm. And that's why you see we always start looking at the short arm, right? So short arm means the support at the elbow. So that's a lesser, you see, that's, if you look at this as the inverted cone, that's a smaller cone of a challenge to the shoulder blade, right? And if we look at it like this, now this is a bigger cone, right? So you see, that's a bigger cone. So this bigger cone is more difficult to stabilize than the small cone, right? So that's the logic that we have to keep in mind. And then, see here, we can observe that that's still the limitation, right? So you see the shoulder blades, they were showing us good stability in respect to the top. So they were not sliding towards the neck. However, when it comes to the freedoms, you see, these freedoms of the edges are doing well, but if it comes to the next depth, the dorsal depth there, So that's where we don't have this dorsal depth. So this is where they kind of blended in the total package with the rib cage and the, the skin of the back. And that's why, here she doesn't have the free movement, the free counter wave of the torso in respect to the arms. So that's the set of the, you see, the back itself with the short arm allows us, you can see that this room is appearing there, but with the long arm, not yet, right? You see it's moving together. So again, these are the stages of the evolution. Now, I'm going to go back to this case, right? So you see, this is the case, big child, missing the dorsal depth, but having the strong wings. His kite, right? So you see, the kite is missing, but the wing is present. So, and with the wing being present, what do you see? Where is his shoulder blade, right? So you see, his shoulder blade is A, being all to the side, right? So you see, but then we also see that effectively the latissimus dorsi in that aspect, right? So you see, as the part of the arm, as the part of the wing, right? So you see, it shows its total contour as it belongs, to the, as a part of the wing. So the same muscle, technically, the same latissimus dorsi plays two roles depending on whether it goes towards the edge, which belongs to the wings, or whether it goes to the middle, which belongs to the spine. You have completely different appearances and very different relationship between the skin muscle and the bone. And you can see this very clearly as we move further, right? So you see here, the arms, the elbows, the shoulder blades are shifted to the side, but the more spectacular things are going to be later. So here is the bending. We already had some of it, but look at this, right? So you see, this is where I'm studying the extended shoulder blade as the wing. See, the skin edges, the bridge, everything is on the side, and it's thick. It's a strong, powerful, thick wing. So this boy, he doesn't have the kite. He doesn't have the actual kite, which belongs to the deeper dorsal thing. He doesn't have it. So he only has the wings. So that's why, what is he doing? His entire activity, right, as we see, his entire activity is trying to save himself with the wings, right? So you see, he always spreads those wings. That's how he balances, because the greater he spreads the wings, and then everything effectively all the way down to his legs, he controls through his wings. So his legs are a non-factor. They're not able to take the weight. They're not anything, right? So you see, it's a super big cone that comes from the sides, and that's how he's stabilizing himself. So therefore, what our strategy would be in this kind of scenario? On the one hand, we want to take what's working and make it work better, right? So you see, within this sort of wing of a shoulder blade, get more, so that it will be sort of the wing itself would be more organized, divided, better attached, and so on and so on. On the other hand, to address the missing parts, right? So you see, that would be building this. You see, you can even observe how naked is the spine, right? So you see, like building that naked, that portion itself, right? So, but in fact, his image is very, very impressive, because as you go further, you can see, look at this massive chunk. It's a huge thing, right? But of course, before, like couple of years ago, it was much tighter. It was all kind of strings and strands and so on, right? So you see with ABR, as we improve those relationships within it, so it's like, facilitate those distributed links within it, so it became all softer, became stronger, and so on and so on and so forth, right? But that's kind of putting to better use the thing that he's already having, right? So that's the wings, like the primary wings. And you see, look at that, right? So you see, these are huge chunks, massive chunks. See, look. And again, here you can see how those bridges, right? So you see, if you go back to our images, right, you can see that between the border of official muscles and the border of that string, there's a huge space, right? And that's exactly what you see here. So you can see that, typically when you see the non-ABR version of this channel, what is going to happen is going to have a much tighter combination of those strings, and which would be spread a lot further. As we improve the integration within the total distribution, so that string starts going further up, gets blended within the skin, and the individual muscles become readable as the specializations within that skin bag of the total wing. So you see here, right? So you see these are the very spectacular layouts. And you see for him, when we're testing their positions, we're looking at the way how the whole thing is oriented on the side. Again, we want we want the stability, right? So we want the true neck, so that they would go down, leave that latitude. But they start within the same latitude, they start far out. So their journey has to be more in than down, and so on. So that's really the very important image. And you see, that's why it's also important for us to look at those sort of smaller details. How prominent is the depth of the spines, right? So you see, what kind of, appearance do we have through the substrands of the, trapezius fascia in that sense, right? So these are all the indicators, but their job is actually very simple. So what we want a simple thing. We want the dorsal depth to become as thick as possible. And within this dorsal depth, you have the links that go from the skin, the ectoderm, towards the bone, the mechanical fat that spreads in, and then, we want to get the connection from the periosteum and the deep fascia that spreads up. So we always come back to those images which I repeatedly showed you, right? Right. So you see those images from the Gumberto videos. So you see where you are discovering that mesh, that link that goes from the skin to the muscle and so on, and kind of remembering this primary integration. So that's the mesh that we're interested in. If this mesh is absent, then the muscles fuse, or the skin fuses into those strands that you see, or the strands, or the strings, or whichever way you call it, the ones that you see on the big wing. So, and that's why those two images of the healthy child, well, healthy, like not healthy, the child who is in a better condition, right, who has at least a certain presence of both components of the wing and the dorsal depth, and kind of evolved to that, and the child who doesn't have the dorsal depth but has the wing. So this is what we need to understand those kids with the sliding, who are missing both, right? So you see, again, for them, it's the first thing is to clear the neck, clear the midsection, get the activation of the actual, like, central ligamentous parts there. But then the big picture, yes, we want those wings, we want those depths. And truth to be told, when it's depleted, we don't know. If you ask me a question like which of them is going to respond more, I'll tell you I don't know. They are all kind of blended, they're all deficient. So what do we need to do? We need to probe, the dorsal, and we need then, probe the more wing-like thing and see which one of them actually responds better, which one of them leads in this situation. And that's what we will then be able to do. So we will be able to identify, okay, so this part is like responds faster, so we will keep feeding that. On the other hand, the part which is behind, we will still try to kind of bring it out of its deficit. So that's going to be the strategy there. So that's the logic of the approach. And if we go further, right, so you see, that's why you see when I look at all those sort of skin tests and so on, so that's what I want to also identify, right? I want to identify the context of what's happening there as the primary link to the base, because that's, if we get back to our image of the latitude, so this is the leading image. So the image of those latitudes, right? So you see where, the head would be like a North Pole, right? So the polar circle. So a lot of those steps, if you count from the depth of the back as they equate. Yeah, so you see, and that's why we are looking at those separations, right? So you see, again, we have to acknowledge that dividing, so seeing those divisions and the specializations within the skin is the most difficult part, right? Because, like you need to really follow those traces and understand what you're looking at. But what we're seeing here, so that's a very big step, so that if we see how the neck divisions, like the descending fibers from the neck and the ascending one from the back, so they're separating, so that's a big step. So we can legitimately expect that then this thickness is going to continue to increase and start giving us some dorsal component. All right, so, and yeah, what else do we see here, right? So you see, we also see another point. So another point is the fact that when the first connections are coming, they are coming from the level of the clavicle. So it's a half depth. So the depth of the shoulder girdle will be developing, adding to this, right? So you see that we want to see the total skin transition towards their maximum link at the depth and then the freedom on the front. So that's why, again, this image, yes, so this image, that's why this image is so important. So that, when you see that the skin is connected to the clavicle, right? So you see, what does it tell you? Well, it tells you that the person has just like half of the body depth, right? So you see that the dorsally, there is not much present yet. So it has to be gradually shifting onto the edges, onto the side, and so on. So that's the overall, like the build of the dorsal depth that we are looking at as the primary thing, as the most important aspect. So yeah, actually the conversation here was about the positions of the shoulder blade, right? So you see, when you look at the pictures, even these pictures here, they tend to show you the strong edge, right? So you see, they tend to show the strong edge, which is this edge, right? This edge. But in reality, this edge, as we speak about the wing, so this edge could be actually even stronger. So because that's where the kind of greatest chord or the greatest density is. So that's why, what you will be able to see is the situation when the bottom part of the shoulder blade shifts. So therefore, instead of this kind of triangle, which you see on the pictures in a familiar way, you're going to see more this line and that appearance, right? So you see, that's will be the typical positioning of the shoulder blade, which you see most often. So That's why we're looking at that exploration, right? And then we move on. And again, this is the big point that we want to look at, is the accentuation of the true dorsal, right? So you see, this is really that a kind of archaeology of looking at what kind of layouts are within the skin, right? And I think that that's sort of segues us into this conversation about the new topics. That, you see, the fact is we have to acknowledge that our understanding of the skin, our understanding of the ectoderm in that big sense, and how significant, not even how significant, but how dominant and leading its role is, our understanding is very poor. So we are all stemming from the same textbooks, right? So you see, if you open any textbook on anatomy, it's all kind of starts with the bones. It's a long list of the bones, and the bones are being connected by the ligaments. Then then those connections are being connected by the muscles and so on. And somewhere at the very end, they will put the skin there. But the skin is not being seen as the leading mechanical factor, strangely enough, right? Because if you look at it from the tensional perspective, it's the most, kind of has the greatest tensile capacity. It's the strongest elements that we have. And again, historically, it all starts with the skin first, and then the specializations they establish within. So, and what we have been lucky to observe with or to stumble upon is that with the usage of the vibration tools, we have been able to get a lot more intense and the specific response from the skin and from the way that it's being organized, and via that response also unlock a lot of those hidden things, like, oh, by the way, this map leads to here, oh, by the way, this map leads to there, and therefore these new conversations which we are bringing and which I was like excited to share, these new conversations about the like double action or about the superficial techniques and so on, how we can use sort of both techniques and also how we can use their different like extensions, right? So you see like different points of the actual or different heads of the gun and so on. So these are giving us the new opportunities. So we can see the new layouts, right? So you see the new layouts and the ability to follow it, because you see that's another huge opportunity that we actually have to acknowledge with the Vibra tools, is that even if I get back to this kid over here, right? So you see with the one with the this massive lateral parts, like we didn't have so much tools to be specific about those levels before, right? So you see, we were looking at the more kind of easily catchable, bigger planes, or the grooves, which are like easier to catch. So that means that there has to be something that we have to be able to stabilize in order to be able to reach with the axis here. But with the Vibra tools, we are actually a lot more flexible. We are able to address even the relatively unstable positions. So even relatively unstable positions, we can get the things done. So, he like barely lies on the side and we can do it. So whilst, with the like whatever wall ball or, whatever other ball, whatever, right? So you see other things and even tapping, we would be having limits on how well we can get the response and how precisely we can get there. So that's really a big opportunity, so that with the Vibra ball, we're really becoming like you can call it the fascia sculpting. So you are literally having this, the chisel of sorts, or some, if you wish, the crossbreed between the chisel of a sculptor, right, and the welding tool of a welder. So you can kind of facilitate connecting together the elements which were disconnected, and on the other hand, separating the elements which were disconnected, which were overly blended together. All that via increasing the distribution of those kind of unsung heroes and those hidden distributed connections, which we can kind of visualize through this axis. So I think that that's really what I wanted to sort of get as the first set of the ideas. And speaking about the shoulder blade, so we kind of got ourselves more or less in that usual 1.5 hour mark, right? And yeah, I hope that at least gets some openings distinguishing the wings from the true backs, right? So you see and how it works, and what are the thicknesses, what are the overlaps that the system is having. So that's why keeping the image of the wing and keeping the image of the depth and keeping the image of the total dorsal kite within this total dorsal depth. So these are the key ideas that you need to have. And again, we kind of come back to the same things. We want maximum dorsalization. Within the maximum dorsalization, we want the least of the muscular kind of work, right? So you see, we want the maximum distribution, and that's what is best through the dorsal elements. And that's basically how it works. And that's what we are happy to see, that the Vibra tools are opening a lot of the new opportunities in this dimension. And that's where the ideas of the, like new maps and the new activation of the previously known maps, that's what we are bringing through this. Okay, so I guess with that, we will say goodbye to the future viewers, right, and the Facebook audiences, and move on to the Q&A for the existent ABR families.